He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
This is Mediawatch. I'm Colin Peacock. This week we look at how the media handled the end of the so-called ban on foreign buyers, or should that be overseas active investors, picking up high-end homes here, and how politicians, who switched positions on that, handled the media. We also look at proposed changes at RNZ, which might mean the loss of jobs and cuts to coverage of music, arts and culture. But first, this week, the Prime Minister and the local boss of the biggest tech company in the world teamed up to announce billions of dollars invested and hundreds of jobs created here, as well as important data storage to make our digital world go faster. Sounds like great news. What could possibly go wrong?
You're off to Amazon. Is there a headline out of that today?
This is an incredible story, right?
That was the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, on the Mike Hosking breakfast after the 7 a.m. news last Tuesday on Newstalk ZB for the second time in 2 days. And the headlines did come out of his upcoming visit to Amazon's new Auckland data centre. But what was the incredible story about Amazon?
Yeah, that AWS, which is their web services, they do all the cloud storages, data centers, and all that stuff. They're investing $7.5 billion in New Zealand. That will have an impact on our GDP for sure, create up to about 1,000 jobs, and it's about almost an $11 billion boost to our GDP.
Well, that is big news, especially in this economy, if true. The Prime Minister told Mike Hosking that a branch of a company that's 3 times the size of our entire economy, investing that in services and people here, was a vote of confidence in New Zealand, in fact, the biggest ever tech investment here. Though Mike Hosking knocked the Prime Minister's confidence a little with this retort.
Have you told them we haven't got the power to run it?
Don't you worry, that's the next problem. Mike, you give me a problem every time we meet.
Just trying to sort the country one day at a time.
Trying to help, he says, well, that's what I'm trying to do too.
Well, the Prime Minister was laughing there, but that question of how much power and where from was no joke, as it turned out. And having thanked the Prime Minister for his time on Tuesday, Mike Hosking then told his listeners this.
$7.5 billion today coming from Amazon, 1,000 jobs. That's a good news day all round. Why don't we hear good news investment stories like that in our mainstream media? Well, they'll get around to it. That was a bit of an exclusive as far as I can work out. Mike, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. Feeling very good about what's happening in New Zealand, so you should be.
But as we'll hear, that story had been in our media over the past 5 years. But, like Mike, ZB's newsroom also reckoned it was a scoop, and it led the next news headlines.
Christopher Luxon has revealed Amazon is making a major announcement this morning. Speaking exclusively to Newstalk ZB's Mike Hosking, he says Amazon Web Services will be announcing a multi-billion-dollar investment.
They're investing $7.5 billion.
ZB's stablemates at the Herald then broke out the ruby red breaking news banner for that news, and the headline, Luxon announces $7.5 billion Amazon investment. And on the streaming show Herald Now, host Garth Bray broke the news like this soon after.
Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has revealed that one of the world's biggest corporations, Amazon, is investing $7.5 billion in New Zealand. He told Newstalk ZB's Mike Hosking that Amazon Web Services, which specialises in cloud storage and data centres, is setting up here in the country.
But it wasn't just NZME's news outlets who were excited by this on Tuesday. In Christchurch, the press rushed out this online within an hour of the Prime Minister appearing on ZB.
Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has shared that Amazon Web Services was investing $7.5 billion into New Zealand. Luxon told Newstalk ZB the amount would have an impact on our GDP for sure.
But it wasn't a scoop or a secret or even a good news story ignored by an ignorant media, as Mike Hosking seemed to believe on Tuesday morning. The Prime Minister didn't actually reveal anything that Amazon itself hadn't already made public some time ago. Christopher Luxon was effectively on Tuesday the guest of honour at a ribbon-cutting launch of a data service centre that was actually powering up a year later than first scheduled. And all that had been announced on the Amazon Web Services blog site the day before, with a little help from AI.
Kia ora. Today, I'm pleased to share the general availability of the AWS Asia Pacific, New Zealand, region with 3 availability zones and API name App Southeast 6. With the new region, Customers can now run workloads and securely store data in New Zealand while serving end users.
It was in
with
fact
even
way
lower
back in
latency.
mid-2021 that Amazon had first unveiled the plan for 3 giant data centres, and those estimates of $7.5 billion in investment, 1,000 new jobs and almost $11 billion over 15 years for our GDP, though that was according to Amazon's own economic impact study at that time. And the fact that the deal for all that was done long before Luxon was Prime Minister was also overlooked by most of our media on Tuesday morning. It was in 2022 that Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern met with Microsoft and Amazon in Seattle after about 2 years of back and forth about building data centres here. And documents that RNZ's Phil Pennington requested under the Official Information Act also showed that Amazon Web Services posed several requests as part of their investment commitment, according to New Zealand officials. And 2 letters between Amazon Web Services and the Prime Minister were withheld in full. In 2023, RNZ also reported a long-term deal for renewable energy with power company Mercury, and when Amazon Web Services appointed a country manager for New Zealand in late 2024, it invited some New Zealand journalists to a Las Vegas tech event to talk to him. Among them was NZME's own senior business reporter Madison Reedy, now Madison Malone. And last December, she revealed that the opening date would be this year, and while the exact locations of 3 data centres were a secret, she said that property records of the New Zealand Property Retail Group revealed that the location was in Auckland's northwest. Now, in March 2024, RNZ, Stuff and Newsroom all reported that drainage was a problem at that site in Westgate. But on the day of the Amazon launch last Tuesday, the media reporting the Prime Minister's comments as an announcement seemed to have forgotten or ignored all of that, except for RNZ, whose story said the Prime Minister was hyping an announcement from back in 2021. Now, as Tuesday morning passed, news websites started to recast their stories as a re-announcement, and ZB's website reported the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon as giving an update on Amazon's investment. And by the time the Prime Minister himself spoke to reporters at the Amazon Web Services site in Auckland, one of the questions was, why are you announcing stuff that was first announced 4 years ago?
I know I've acknowledged that there's been a piece of work that's been in the progress, I think, since 2021. It's just that it's been launched live today, and I was just drawing attention to the fact that it's a significant investment. We also have conversations happening since our infrastructure summit with many other international investors as well, areas around data centres, areas around public infrastructure as well. But no, this has been coming for some time. I've been very upfront about that, but I'm just excited the fact that here is an example of what we want to see a lot of.
And if the Prime Minister was just sharing his excitement, well, the media certainly were too on Tuesday morning. But by the time the 6 p.m. news rolled around, they were also amplifying the grievances of the Labour Party, accusing the Prime Minister of picking low-hanging fruit that they had planted in rather crude terms.
What does Fig Jam stand for?
Christopher Luxon is the Fig Jam Prime Minister. I think people can have a lot of fun Googling that.
So we Googled it. Fig Jam is Australian slang to describe someone who is overly boastful of their abilities. Fig Jam stands for I'm good, just ask me.
And there was much more mirth about Fig Jam forthcoming. But party political point scoring and egos were really not the story. Whether the 2021 plan was actually going to plan was, because there wasn't any evidence that the 3 data centres announced back then had been built or even would be. On Tuesday, the Herald also published a piece by its own tech insider, journalist Chris Keel, who'd been keeping an eye on Amazon's land in northwest Auckland and finding that the site was virtually abandoned. And so had Newsroom Pro editor Jonathan Milne, who reported Amazon had given up on the build because of rising power prices since 2021. It just goes to show, he said, how much has changed in its much-vaunted expansion plans over 4 years. Jonathan Milne also said that photos and videos supplied to the media last Tuesday actually showed big data centres overseas, and the company just hadn't built what it proposed to build in 2021. And the power prices being paid and people employed by Mercury Energy to make their green electricity were probably also included in those impressive-sounding GDP-boosting statistics. And Jonathan Milne also said that the country manager for Amazon Web Services, Manuel Bonet, didn't explain that the cheaper and easier structure was now up and running. Jonathan Milne's verdict?
One of the clumsiest and most embarrassing attempts to evade answering a question I've seen from any business leader for a long time.
The managing director of the Kiwi cloud storage company Catalyst IT told Jonathan Milne it was possible that Amazon had merely stacked its technology up at an existing data centre, and that was what was being launched to New Zealand clients on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, Jonathan Milne told RNZ's 9 to Noon this.
I think what you need to see this as part of a reasonably large marketing play on Amazon's part. They did just the same recently in Australia, where they wheeled out Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, and they re-announced $20 billion of investment in data centres there. They've done the same thing here. They've re-announced this money. They've re-announced the jobs. They have confirmed that they've switched on their data centres, but we do believe there are only server racks in other people's data centres.
And if that had changed, well, it also raised questions about Amazon's other big figures from 4 years ago, about the jobs and economic impact that were being recycled and restated emphatically last Tuesday morning. On 3 News, the host Sam Hayes then asked reporter Zane Small if this was really a good thing after all.
Kia ora, Zane. So it was a bit confusing there this morning, but is this the big deal that the government has made it out to be?
Yeah, well, it is a shame that there was that confusion over the infrastructure because it is a significant investment in New Zealand. And ultimately, at a time when the New Zealand economy is struggling and eager for investment, this does appear to be a positive development.
OK, good to know, Zane. Thanks so much.
But it wasn't what it said in the tin back in 2021, or in the pictures being handed out to the media, or the picture painted by the media and the Prime Minister on Tuesday morning. On ZB's afternoon show on Wednesday, tech expert Peter Griffin was also asked, was this really a good thing in the end or not?
So anything where we're seeing literally billions of dollars come in investment, that is a really good thing. But the worm has turned a little bit on big tech when it comes to these data centres, because it really is shoring up this sort of cozy duopoly or oligopoly that these companies have over our data and increasingly over our energy supply as well. And a lot of people are like, where is the sovereignty? How do we steer our own destiny rather than just give all of our valuable data to these 3 or 4 big American companies?
And when Heather Duplessis-Allen sounded off on News Talk ZB on Wednesday afternoon, she had reached a similar conclusion.
You could argue that Amazon running those data centres is actually not the best outcome for New Zealand, because Amazon does not pay tax on all of their revenue here, which means if another local company used those data centres and paid full tax like they do, we'd all be better off. We'd be better off than Amazon using the centres and then sending hundreds of millions of dollars overseas like Google and Facebook do.
Now that's an arrangement the media here really ought to understand. It's what they've been up against themselves for much of the past 20 years. But in the end, Heather Duplessis-Allen wound up with this.
I think you should interrogate an announcement just a little bit more than simply taking it at face value, because that is what Amazon wants you to do. They want to play us for fools.
However, anyone listening to ZB the previous day would be thinking it was ZB themselves that needed to hear that "don't get fooled again" message. One of the reasons that Amazon Web Services is expanding digital data services here in New Zealand in the first place is the rise of AI technology. AWS will be boosting AI tools here in New Zealand, like Amazon's own Bedrock and Nova, the machine learning platform SageMaker, as well as OpenAI's field leader ChatGPT. Now, last week, the annual report of the industry group, the AI Forum, said that AI was making New Zealand businesses much more productive, and one of the case studies was in news production, with a former RNZer at the helm. Peter Fowler founded New Zealand's first internet news service almost 30 years ago. More recently, he was RNZ's Hawke's Bay reporter, and for about 15 years he's been working in Hawke's Bay on machine learning for news, and now an AI-powered system that he says could work for New Zealand newsrooms. So what did he make of this week's Amazon opening in Auckland and the way it was reported?
Well, I was doom scrolling, away, and then it sort of flashed up on my screen. 7.5 billion new investment in tech sector with a picture of Christopher Luxon, and I can't remember exactly where it came from. And I looked back on social media to see if it was from their social media accounts, but curiously, they put nothing on their social media accounts about it. And I've had, very experienced journalists contact me saying, what the hell was going on there, It was very odd.
But, we had journalists like Chris Keel, who understands technology, at the Herald. Newsroom's Jonathan Milne had been all over it, photographing that site, following the story of of how the project was. So was it in fact a bit of a failure or an omission that it wasn't actually what had been promised 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think it came across as somebody trying to spin something, and it went horribly wrong. And so that's maybe why nothing appeared on social media, because suddenly, it had been framed. And remember, this is all about framing. So AI. How would AI have framed that? It would have remembered.
But in a sense, I suppose the other view would be, okay, maybe this was kind of corrected, like within 24, 48 hours, it was pointed out that this was not actually what it appeared at first. And so never wrong for long, but maybe AI could actually shorten that process, could have flagged that up a bit sooner.
Oh, it would have done it in 4 minutes. But what this shows you, and it really exposes something which is so crucial for New Zealand, is that we need to ensure that we have experienced journalists, that actually know the full background to this, that can frame it in the right perspective. And I think that's the thing that really came, in the end, what came through to me was that this just reinforced the value of organisations like Newsroom and Jonathan Milne, and, giving the public reliable sort of information that puts things in perspective. Because these things require resources, they require electricity, in some cases they require water. What are the 1,000 jobs? I mean, I understand a data centre takes about 100 people to run. A lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, some of those jobs could actually be in the electricity, the supply of the green energy, which then became another question about, well, okay, if these things are very energy hungry, what does that mean for the rest of the market? And that kind of wasn't there on a Tuesday morning either when this thing was being trumpeted as a big new advance. Seriously, though, your news engine, if information from Amazon or from the government, if there was a press release had been fed into it, it might even pick up that this matches patterns of what was said and announced 4 years ago, and that link could have been made automatically?
Yes, that's where we're going. And we'll be there, I would say, very soon. Because journalists and AI actually work the same way. They look for patterns. And of course, it would have found that pattern, and then it would have said that this has been, and it would have ended up flagging it, sending an alert to the editor saying this is being packaged up as a new announcement, when really it seems to be just an opening and a re-announcement of what was said that they were going to do, and now they're doing it.
That was Peter Fowler, a pioneer of online news here in New Zealand when the internet was a new thing, and the founder of VoxPop, which is now pioneering machine learning for journalism in New Zealand. And last week, the annual New Zealand AI Forum conference heard how he reckoned his AI-powered VoxPop news engine had successfully and automatically reported the Kamchatka earthquake and following tsunami warnings back in July, and they did it faster than the global mainstream media. So this week I talked to Peter about how that works and how it might work in New Zealand newsrooms, and also about the hazards of automating the news with AI and how to handle the mistakes the new technology is making. And you can hear all that next weekend here on Mediawatch. Last weekend here on Mediawatch, I spoke to the Chief Executive and Editor-in-Chief Paul Thompson about RNZ's new plan for audio, centred on stemming the loss of listeners that RNZ National has been suffering for the past 5 years or so. And that followed a pretty harsh review of RNZ by former News Chief Richard Sutherland, who recommended some pretty sweeping changes and a couple of major hires to push them through. But all of that would have to be done against the backdrop of a 7% cut to the RNZ budget, meaning RNZ has to save about $4.5 million a year from next year. So last week I also asked Paul Thompson, would services or people have to go to achieve that?
We have a plan to accommodate that, focusing on some of the areas of our costs which are adjustable, are variable, things like our marketing budget and our commissioning budget. We've also completed a voluntary redundancy round, which has brought us some ongoing cost savings. So there's no big bang here. It is just the business of being an organisation, a media organisation, and certainly a publicly funded organisation in 2025.
Well, Paul Thompson didn't mention it there, but RNZ was also reviewing its coverage of music, arts and culture, in part with those savings in mind. And this week, RNZ staff were told of proposed changes affecting a number of roles and programs. The Saturday afternoon show Music 101 is still part of the plan, But the long-running At the Movies is to be decommissioned in its current form, according to the proposal. And for Sunday afternoon art show Culture 101, the two current presenters would be replaced by just one, with a multimedia producer working for the show, along with other producers creating other arts and culture content, including new music features, reviews and interviews for delivery across all of RNZ's platforms, according to the proposal. And the programming and scheduling of music at RNZ will also be rejigged. But the starkest change is the proposal to close the youth-focused digital service Tahi and disestablish its four main roles. The website tahi.fm also hosts playlists, web series, podcasts and other youth-focused content. And this is also an especially interesting change given how Tahi came about in the first place less than 4 years ago, and the fact that a big part of the new RNZ audio plan is to target the core audience that's over 50 years of age for RNZ National. Last week I asked Paul Thompson, isn't that an abandonment of younger listeners?
No, it's not. We now have a whole range of services to deliver our content to audiences. We can now get to younger audiences much more efficiently and effectively through our YouTube channel, 200,000 plus subscribers there. RNZ National is a talk radio station primarily. The talk market is 50 plus. And if you just look at the commissioned content that we have released recently, it includes My Favourite Dead Person and Bird's Eye View, two very specialist pieces of content for younger listeners and younger audiences, and that'll go right across our portfolio. So we are more than one radio station, and we have to be keeping in mind that audiences will come to us how they want to come to us and do the best job we can across that portfolio.
But part of that portfolio that can be used to target younger people will go, if Tahi goes, under this new proposal for music, arts and culture coverage. 5 years ago, part of RNZ's strategy was a stretch goal to build lifelong relationships with a broader range of New Zealanders into the future. And back then, Paul Thompson proposed an entire new radio network for younger people, supported with music and original online content. That was backed by the RNZ board in 2020, and they were even prepared to shift RNZ Concert from its FM frequencies to accommodate that. But in the end, the Youth Radio Network plan fell apart after heavy public and political pressure to keep RNZ Concert on the air. And even the Prime Minister at that time got involved.
Radio New Zealand, yes, have obligations to all New Zealanders, and it's their view that they are currently not catering for one sector. But it is my view as Arts Minister, keeping aside that I cannot interfere in their programming, it's my view that one does not need to come at the cost of another.
So instead of the mooted Youth Radio Network, RNZ eventually launched the much more modest Tahi, built on streaming music, 40% of which was local, in December 2021.
This is Tahi.
Now at that time, RNZ's head of content Megan Whelan told Mediawatch they did a lot of research to find out what it was that younger people wanted.
We want to make sure that it is for and by young people. It's about them. I'm not the one making the content decisions on Tahi. When we started commissioning content for it, we got a panel of young people, and particularly a panel of young people who aren't RNZ listeners, who don't look at our website. We got them to come and tell us what they thought were cool. They're the ones making the calls. My job is just to kind of clear the path for them and get out of the way.
Now, it isn't easy to attract young people to a new media brand and harder still to hold on to them. And Megan Whelan knew this from her time at RNZ's previous youth focus site, The Wireless, that failed to fire and was folded back into the RNZ website after about 5 years in 2018. So, back when Tahi launched in 2021, Mediawatch also asked Megan Whelan, would RNZ stick with Tahi even if it didn't pull a crowd quickly?
If in 6 months or a year we say, actually, we did this experiment and it didn't work, the answer isn't, well, let's not do it anymore. The answer is, well, then how do we do it? Let's get it right and do it in a different way. And I think that's a thing that we haven't been particularly good at as an organisation over time. It doesn't have to be a massive stop one day and start a new thing the next day. It can just be, let's change things over time and try new things. Are we committed to continuing to serve this audience? Yes, young people deserve public media.
Well, as it turned out, Tahi hasn't built a big following on online platforms, including TikTok and YouTube, and it hasn't branched out into radio content as Megan Whelan hoped it might at the outset. And Megan Whelan left RNZ last month while RNZ was reviewing its coverage of music, arts and culture. But if Tahi and its staff are disestablished under this new proposal, how does RNZ propose to serve that audience? Well, this week RNZ told Mediawatch this is only a proposal and no decisions have been made. They've sought feedback from affected staff, so no comment is possible right now, they say. But in a statement, RNZ's interim head of content, John Harteveld, said the proposed changes to the coverage of music, arts and culture are a necessary response to the reduction of RNZ's funding, the clearest sign yet that the budget cuts will cut RNZ services. Now, when Tahi's music stream kicked off back in December 2021, they did it with a TikTok hit by the US singer Nessa Barrett. Wonder what they'll go out with if the proposal to close Tahi comes to pass.
I hope they call you out for things you said. I hope you're miserable until you're dead.
Earlier we heard how a photo opportunity with the Prime Minister at Amazon on Tuesday made the news, but that followed up another one the previous day in which the Prime Minister also zeroed in on foreign investment and technology and sparked debate in the media about whether it was really a good thing in the end or not. Now, this one was all about the end of the ban on buying big-ticket homes here for holders of Golden Ticket Active Investor Plus visas. And on ZB's Talkback on Tuesday, one listener was keen for the Amazon mega mogul to make an offer.
I have a nice lifestyle block worth about $1.5 million. I want to know how I can get Jeff Bezos to pay $5 million for it. Do you have his email or phone number? Says John. I think everybody's going to be listing furiously, hoping to drive that price up.
And the same gag occurred to the Herald Now host Garth Bray that same morning.
And you wonder where Jeff Bezos is going to buy his house. Check out the open homes in Newland this weekend, perhaps. Maybe not.
And earlier on the Mike Hosking breakfast on ZB, the Prime Minister made some pretty bold claims about the impact of the end of the foreign buyers ban.
I mean, the cool thing is we've had 300 applicants. We actually had 308. We got another 7 over the weekend applying for this active investor visa. That's almost $2 billion we didn't have in the economy on April 1. That's now here. It's doing the things like I talked about with these companies, Seaflux and Cleanly and others. They're coming from all over the world,
Good.
Which is exactly what we need.
Yes, we do.
But applications doesn't mean money coursing through the national economy just yet. But ZB's Mike Hosking approved in his daily editorial, Mike's Minute.
It all helps. It was a good day for New Zealand Inc.
And a good day for the Prime Minister's news management. The next day, the story was on the front page of all the metropolitan daily papers, and it led One News at 6 on Monday night.
Tonight on One News, a golden visa opportunity for wealthy foreigners with plenty of cash to splash. Rich investors will now be allowed to buy flash homes in New Zealand.
And the Prime Minister's visit to a software company, which he said was already benefiting from Active Investor Plus investment, also led 3 News.
Christopher Luxon and Cabinet Ministers learning about maritime technology company Seaflux, a New Zealand firm that runs an app that helps manage vessels, consolidating compliance, maintenance and crew management. It just secured nearly $3 million in capital, thanks to foreign cash invested in New Zealand as part of the government's so-called Golden Visa scheme.
This company, Seaflux, wouldn't have an extra $3 million worth of capital injection if it wasn't for active investor visas.
Several ministers were alongside with Sealux for his visit to Seaflux, but Stuff Zane Small noted that New Zealand First's Winston Peters was not one of them. It was clear there were differences between the party leaders on this policy change, and on RNZ's First Up, the ACT leader David Seymour couldn't have made it any clearer, any more concisely.
We entered into an agreement with 2 other parties who, one of them wanted to make it 2 million, the other one wanted to make it 5. We would make it 0, but that's where we got to, as 5.
Now, Winston Peters and his New Zealand First Party have, of course, long railed against foreign ownership of New Zealand property, and on Monday he got tetchy with reporters for even calling it the foreign buyers ban. And when ZB's Mike Hosking asked him if he had to be dragged kicking and screaming to support this policy change, Winston Peters ended up blaming RNZ's Morning Report.
The first thing they said after my interview was that it was about removing the foreign buyers ban. Now, this is breathtaking stuff. I just finished the interview, pointed out that they were accessing less than 1% of the market, and 90% of the market was available to New Zealanders, and they still said that. So my anxiety was around misrepresentation.
And then Mike Hosking picked up that ball and ran with it.
Well, that's what you get for dealing with low renters, Winston. I mean, what can I say?
But the thing is, Winston Peters raised no objections on Morning Report with Ingrid Hipkiss, who only said foreign buyers ban once, in what was a very civil news interview. This was in RNZ's news headlines soon after.
New Zealand First's leader says negotiations over the foreign buyers ban took so long because his party held out for the $5 million threshold.
And all in all, that was a pretty fair summary. Meanwhile, it was Mike Hosking who'd been hassling the Prime Minister about the foreign buyers ban so often and so intensely that it became a running joke between the pair.
Now, I ask you one more time.
God, this is foreign buyers, isn't it?
It is foreign buyers. Is today the day? Are we any closer to being able
we
to
are very
offer...
close, Mike, and I've said that now for the last 7 weeks. I think you've been hammering me on this point every single week.
But now that Winston Peters has given ground politically on foreign buyers, overseas active investors acquiring high-value homes here, it seems he has to carry on the fight with someone, and the media will do. That's it for this weekend. Thanks for listening. If you have any thoughts for us or ideas for us to follow up, do get in touch. Email us at mediawatch@rnz.co.nz, or you'll also find us at MediawatchNZ on X. And you can even write us a letter and send it to PO Box 123 Wellington. I'll be back again next Wednesday with Midweek Media Watch. Catch you then. In the meantime, follow Media Watch and listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app to make sure you never miss an episode.